Welcome back. I'm Dr. Cheek and I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. And today we're going to talk a little bit about cognitive flexibility. And I know we've talked a lot and you hear people talk all the time about cognitive dissonance. And do you ever wonder what's the counter to cognitive dissonance or what's the opposite of cognitive dissonance? And when I refer to cognitive dissonance, I mean that rigidity in thought that sometimes causes us to engage in self-deception or lying to ourselves in order to maintain the status quo as far as what we're thinking, as far as our perception of our internal and external worlds, and sometimes to kind of keep us from having to change the way we think or feel or view a specific situation or an ideal that we have. Now that's cognitive dissonance. Now you may wonder what's the opposite of that. Now the true opposite of that is cognitive consonance. And cognitive consonance is the harmony and balance between thought. Now, cognitive consonance is a little bit problematic because sometimes it focuses on the idea of us being able to hold two competing or contradictory thoughts in our mind that doesn't make sense to hold true for both of them, but we logically try to make sense of it. And I'll talk about that in a different video. But for today, what I'm going to focus on as a counter for cognitive dissonance, instead of cognitive consonance, is cognitive flexibility. And cognitive flexibility is that number one tool that most of us would like to have or would want to have in order to have mental stability and a greater level of mental health. Now, cognitive flexibility is the ability to adapt and change your thoughts and your behaviors when faced with a new situation or when faced with an old situation that requires some level of change. In neurology terms, cognitive flexibility talks about the ability to shift between tasks or switching between two different behaviors or tasks with effectiveness and efficiency, or what they sometimes call set shifting or task switching. Now, cognitive flexibility also allows us to think in nuances. So we are able to see different ideas and the nuances in those ideas, and we don't have a more black and white way of thinking. And when I'm talking about black and white thinking, having a black and white or all-in-one approach to thinking is what we consider a cognitive distortion or a thought distortion, and it's a skewed or slanted way of thinking that may sometimes cause people to not be able to see the nuances in a situation. So it's like either good or bad or right or wrong. There is no gray area, hence the black and white. And that is the opposite of cognitive flexibility. Now, cognitive flexibility means we have the ability to adapt and to make the necessary changes in our thought process and in our behaviors to meet the changes in our external and internal environment, whether that be situation specific or thought specific. So these are some ways that you might be able to tell that you have cognitive flexibility. One way you may be able to tell if you have cognitive flexibility is when plans or your resolution to problems don't go according to your plan or your outcomes, or don't get you the outcomes that you're expecting. If you're able to adjust either your way of seeing the plans that you have or thinking about the problem you had and being able to make the necessary changes in order to get the outcome you desire, or be able to adjust the outcome that you're wanting from either the plan or the problem that you're dealing with. That's what it means to be cognitively flexible. You're able to adjust when things don't go accordingly, and it doesn't require this emotional upheaval. You're simply able to adjust how you respond to that situation, whether it's a change in plans or the resolution when you're trying to solve a problem. Another way is when things change unexpectedly, or when things change expectedly as a result of normal life transitions. So when I say normal life transitions, I mean going from high school student to adulthood or into college, going from being a full-time employee to being retired. Those normal transitions that sometimes happen in life. When those things happen, you're able to, again, adjust or adapt to those situations. You do not have this rigidity that then says, I don't want these things to change. You're aware that the change is going to happen, and either you prepare for those changes ahead of time when they are the normal transitions in life, or you adjust and adapt when those changes are unexpected. Also, a part of that is being able to admit and acknowledge that the transition and the change itself is challenging, and not trying to suppress how you're feeling about the change, how much the change may affect how you are currently seeing yourself or your life circumstances, but acknowledging it and admitting that the transition is going to be difficult, but having a plan for those transitions that are expected and being able to positively adjust when those changes are unexpected. And the last way that you may be able to identify if you have cognitive flexibility is you have the ability to hold on to two competing ideas about a similar situation without rushing to either push out or dismiss the new information, or without rushing to replace the existing thoughts that you're having with that new information. You're able to incorporate or integrate or release certain information as it relates to learning new things. You know how to incorporate new information into your existing thought process. And it doesn't require that you lie to yourself about what you're feeling and what you're thinking. It doesn't require that you change your entire approach to how you deal with things in your life and how you deal with the situation. You're able to see, again, those nuances in those two opposing thoughts and come up with a more integrated thought process as it relates to those opposing thoughts. So all of those are ways that we can think about or how we can identify when we have cognitive flexibility. It doesn't take a lot of mental strength. It doesn't take an emotional toll. You're able to positively adjust and adapt to the changes that are in your environment that requires changes in your thoughts or in your behaviors. Now, what I hope you take from this video today is cognitive dissonance is something we talk a lot about, and that's that rigidity in thought, wanting to hold on to old ideas because we feel comfortable with those ideas and new information feels uncomfortable and we don't know how to incorporate that new information. And the counter to that is cognitive flexibility. And cognitive flexibility is the ability to adapt and adjust to changes in your environment that may require changes in your behavior or changes in your thoughts, and you're able to adjust to those things. Cognitive flexibility is the most useful tool that you can have as it relates to mental stability, mental wellness, or mental health. All of those things require you to be able to adapt and to adjust, because the one thing that is consistent in everyone's life is change. So your ability to positively adjust or to adapt to those situations is necessary and actually causes less mental anguish when we're faced with those changes. That cognitive flexibility allows us to make the necessary adjustments and know when there are no adjustments that need to be made. Cognitive flexibility is being able to know when you need to adjust, address and acknowledge how you're thinking and feeling about a situation, and make those changes, make those adaptations, make those adjustments as needed, whether it's through changes in thoughts or changes in behavior. As always, please feel free to jot down any thoughts, questions, or comments you have below. I hope you've learned something from this video today. I thank you for taking the time to listen, and I'll be seeing you again very soon. Thank you.